Welcome to the Crown and Sage podcast, where we interview great San Diegans doing fantastic things in the community. I'm so excited to have my great friend Jano Galindo with me today.
So,
Welcome, man.
thank you, bro. Appreciate it.
So excited. I'm so excited to talk about your
Of
practice,
course.
your business, your life philosophy. For those of you who don't know, Jano is a yogi, yoga instructor, philosopher,
Hmm.
gets people moving. You have a lot of fans, and I know that whenever I talk to people in the space, the yoga space, and I always talk about, hey, have you taken Hano's class? Oh my God, yes, the vinyasa with Hano is the most challenging. Welcome, man. I'm glad to
Thank you.
have you.
I appreciate it.
So yoga,
Hmm.
yoga is so big these days.
Hmm.
It's almost so trendy and hip and hipstery, but the roots of yoga in the States is it goes way back to,
Hmm.
correct me if I'm wrong, the beatniks, the hippies in the
Hmm.
50s and 60s, kind of as they're leaning into Eastern philosophies, meditation, and they're looking for alternative connection to a higher source. They rediscovered yoga, but yoga came to the States a lot sooner than that, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yoga first came to the States um, probably in like the early 1900s. And it was like the sort of first time that people from India ventured out. There was a guy named Swami Vivekananda who gave a speech at this World Conference of Religion in the late 1800s. But he went back to India, and there wasn't anybody that kind of stayed in the Western sort of world until like the early 1920s and 1930s. That was Swami Yogananda. Yeah, and he came in. He actually was here in San Diego, which is really interesting. He traveled throughout all of the states, but um, he wrote his autobiography of a yogi in Encinitas.
Oh, okay. The Self Realization
Yes,
Center? That's his
yeah,
too, right?
that's his
Okay.
place. And so he was the one that kind of stayed in the states and really like set the sort of foundation for what we have as modern yoga or Western yoga. And then you're right, like in the 60s more or less was when like it really boomed. You had a lot of the hippies that were doing like meditation and TM. And what's really interesting, what's really funny is that it was like the Beatles that
Yes.
really like made yoga mainstream. So like when George Harrison went back to India and he studied with Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who's the guy who brought TM or
TM.
transcendental meditation. They brought him back to the West, and that's when it really kind of became super popular and mainstream. And so the Beatles are like a big part of like the yoga revolution in the United States.
Oh man, the Beatles. I think the Beatles, people don't know, but they kind of revitalized not only yoga but meditation
Mhm.
through TM with Mahesh,
Yes.
and then also psychedelics with
Hmm.
Maria Sabina. I know Maria Sabina was really
Absolutely.
reluctant to teach them anything
Hmm.
about psychedelics and whatnot down in Mexico.
Hmm.
Um, so perfect story. My dad is the one who got me into yoga,
Hmm.
but no coincidence here. He's a ridiculous Beatles fan,
Uh-huh.
right? So often on screen, I've said how I mock him and kind of give him crap and like, hey, the Rolling Stones are a better rock band, and he gives me shit like, shut
Yeah.
up, you don't know anything. But he was a kind of quasi hippie rocker,
Hmm.
was in a Beatles cover band growing up and so forth. And he was really into yoga. And growing up for me, I grew up with him practicing yoga in this spare room that we had that was
Hmm.
just empty. And he had this massive book, this big book, and I forget the name of the yogi, but
Hmm.
all the pictures were black and white.
Uh-huh.
And there was this yogi in Speedos
Yeah.
doing these poses
Hmm.
and then these facial, like with the tongue sticking out
Yeah.
and the whole thing. Like as a kid, I'm like, what the hell is this?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But he would practice on a daily basis
Hmm.
to the point that our whenever we got in trouble, my brother and I, he wouldn't hit us. He would make us hold yoga poses
Wow.
for what seemed like an eternity. I
Yeah.
mean, we're dripping sweat, like
Yeah.
was it chair pose,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
holding it, but he would add extra torture, like these
Wow.
little dumbbells we're
Wow.
holding up, like, oh my God, we're shaking,
Hmm.
shaking, don't put it down. That was his punishment for his movement. So I had a really interesting relation. So I had, as a young man, I associated yoga with punishment. So I was like reluctant to get into it.
Yes.
But no coincidence that
Yeah.
that you brought up the Beatles and my dad was a yogi, and that was those were my first experiences with yoga.
Mhm.
Um, and then in the early 2000s, I found you.
Mhm.
I met you in the early 2000s or late 90s actually.
Yeah.
I think it was late 90s. When you guys with Kish, you guys
Yes.
opened up Chula Vista Yoga Center.
Mhm.
And I believe, correct me if I'm
Mhm.
wrong again. I believe you guys were the first ones to really bring in mass and make yoga popular again here, not only in the South County but
Mhm.
San Diego at
Yep.
large. Can you tell us a little bit about that
Of course.
history?
Yeah, I think, going back, it was early 2000s, and, what's really cool is that I was living in Los Angeles, and Kish was living, like, in New York, and we both came back to San Diego, and, we kinda reconnected. We kept in touch or whatever, but we reconnected, and he was like, "Hey, I'm opening up a yoga studio," and I had already started practicing. Similar to your dad,
No.
I found a book that had a bunch of yoga poses in it. It was a book by Deepak Chopra. The one that you mentioned, in my mind, I think it probably would be like an Iyengar book,
Yes,
'cause he
yes,
sounds
yes,
like
yes, that's it,
it sounds
that's
just
it.
like an Iyengar
Yes.
style. So, I was practicing yoga, but I'd never taken a class, and, he, was opening the space or building out the space. It used to be, a plumbing store, the place where the Chula Vista Yoga Center is now, and, it took, like, a year for it to get built out, and in that time, he kinda took me under his wing because he had already done teacher training, and he had already
Oh,
been involved in teaching a lot of yoga, and I was just kind of, like, doing it on my own. I was more into meditation, um, and then when it came time to open up the space, we, invited all of our friends, and, out of everybody that was invited, only 3 people came, and it was like a private class just to kinda get a feel for the studio, and I was there, and, like, I that was my first yoga class I had ever
oh,
taken.
wow.
Yeah, and it was a Bikram class. So, it was, like, 105 degrees.
Oh, man,
Yeah,
sweat lodge.
yeah, it was brutal, and I thought I was gonna die. Like, I had never felt anything like that in my whole life, as far as, like, being pushed to that limit. Um, but after that class, I'd never felt like that either, as
Wow.
far as, like, how good I felt or how amazing it felt in my body. So, like, I went back the next day and the next day and the next day. So I was, like, literally there every day for weeks, and by about week 4 or 5 of actually going every day, I didn't really know what I was gonna do with my life because I was a musician before, and that's kinda, like, what got me into yoga. And, I lived in Los Angeles, like I said, trying to be a rock star, trying to,
Nice.
like, live out that dream of, making it in LA, and, it didn't work out, so I came back to San Diego kinda tail between my legs, didn't have any sort of background or any resource to sort of fall back on, and I remember laying in shavasana one day and looking at my best friend teaching yoga class, and I was like, "Hey, like, I could do that. Like, I feel called to that." And I told him, I'm like, "Hey, I'd love to learn how to teach." And he's like, "Bro, I need all the help I can get. So,
Oh,
like, here's the next teacher training. Let's get you signed up and get you ready for it," which was about 4 months away. I went to that teacher training, which I had to move to Los Angeles. It was a 9-week program. At that time, yoga now, as far as teacher trainings go, there's like hours. You have to do 200 hours, so on. At that time, in the early 2000s, there was no hours. There was no sort of like time frame. It was just yoga. So it was a 9-week program, 12 to 14 hours every day. We had to do 2 classes a day. It was really, really
wow.
hard. But one of the, if not the most incredible experience of my life. Um, I did that whole 9 weeks. I graduated on a Saturday, moved back to San Diego on Sunday, taught my first class Monday, and I've been teaching almost every day ever since.
Nonstop since then.
Yeah, this is year 24.
Oh, wow.
So to answer your question, originally the Chula Vista Yoga Center was one of the first studios, as well as South Park Yoga, which was formerly known as Ginseng Yoga,
Right.
and Prana Yoga Center up in La Jolla. I believe there was an Ashtanga Yoga Center in Encinitas that was around at that same time. So there was yoga, but like it was few and far between. And so we were kind of like on the scene very early on, and now it's just kind of like exploded all over the place.
Wow, I didn't know your origin story as an instructor. What
Mhm.
what an inspiration. So you were in shavasana, laying down.
Mhm.
Out, shavasana typically is
Yeah.
typically towards the
It's the end of the class.
end
Yeah,
of
absolutely.
class, and you're just kind of in breath and
Mhm.
kind of diffusing from
Yes.
all the breath work and so forth. So you're there and you get this insight, like, "Oh,
Mhm.
I'm gonna be a teacher," and you
Yeah.
haven't looked back.
I haven't looked back, and like I said, at that time in my life, I, had dealt with a lot as far as like addiction, alcohol, uh, no college education. Music was all I had
Right.
at that time, and so I didn't really have anything to fall back on. I was really depressed in a really dark place, and so yoga just kind of came into my life at the perfect time.
Wow.
Um,
No accidents, no
no accidents,
coincidence.
absolutely.
So, how did yoga help with, with the addictions and all the other things that you had just mentioned? How did it help you regulate that?
Yeah, thankfully, I had already been considering or working towards recovery. And I think that in the process of teaching yoga and continuing my practice very early on, um, it just kind of became very natural
Yeah.
to want to be a better version of myself, physically, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally, energetically as well. And so all the things that was doing prior to that, I could really notice how it was holding me back, how it was kind of keeping me stagnant. And so it was just sort of like a very natural process to kind of overcome that. And I gave up alcohol cold turkey one day. I was like, all right,
Wow.
that's it. And I haven't had a drink of alcohol in over 17 years.
Wow.
And so like all of the other things that kind of like go along with that, I do believe they're a result of kind of, the perseverance of just staying consistent with the practice and the discipline that goes along with it. And I think that's what really makes a difference in having longevity with recovery. And
Wow. Thank you for sharing that story. Such a personal and vulnerable story. It's so poignant in these times, I think, because a lot of men are struggling with that. I'm not saying that women don't struggle with
of
that
course.
either. Um, you know, I just think men often are afflicted by addictions to whatever it could be. It could
Mhm.
be alcohol, it could be drugs, it could be porn.
Absolutely.
Because men, for some reason, I feel like we are escapist or we
Mhm,
need to mask
mhm,
things and we can't be vulnerable. So I really appreciate that because I did want to talk to you about specifically men in yoga.
mhm,
And I know historically, traditionally, culturally, it was typically males who practice yoga.
mhm,
I don't know if that's still the case in India and the Far East. But in the United States and most Western countries, it's inverted. I was reading some numbers earlier today that approximately 75, 78% of practitioners are female
mhm.
versus 25-ish percent are male.
Yeah,
Why is that?
yeah, it's really wild. So, yeah, obviously, yoga originates in India, and it was originally taught on a one by one basis. So, if you had some sort of ailment or affliction or whatever, you would go to the local guru or yogi and say, "I've got this going on, insomnia or whatever," and he would say, "Okay, do these postures, do this breath work, do this meditation, come back and see me, and let me know how it's going." So it was almost like you go to see the doctor and they would prescribe yoga
Wow.
for your symptoms. And so that was the way that it was originally taught,
Wow.
like way back. It evolved, and what's really interesting, and I think that like not a lot of people really know this, but modern yoga is very new. It kind of came around in the 1800 1900s when the British Empire, occupied India and colonized India. You had a lot of these local indigenous Indian people, be recruited into the British Army. And so they took a lot of like their exercises and a lot of the regiments they were doing in combination with what they had already known with yoga. And that's where you get like this whole boom of like all these modern postures like downward dog. All that stuff wasn't around.
Really?
Yeah, it wasn't around originally. Everything originally was all designed to open up your hips, your knees, so that you can sit in meditation. That's the goal.
So the goal was for meditation.
Absolutely, and they
Okay.
say you need to be able to sit for 3 to 6 hours without any sort of disruption, and so originally, like, way back, like, thousands of years ago, these, original yogis would find that they would be able to sit for periods of time until their bodies just kind of, like, gave out. So they would
Wow.
be in deep meditation, and they couldn't go further, and these are the guys that are exploring the inner working of the human condition, so to say, and, so they designed all of these basic postures to open up the hips, to open up their legs, to open up their backs, to be able to sit for longer periods of time, to go deeper in meditation. So it
Wow.
wasn't until like the 1800s, or like I said, when they came, British Army came around and did all these exercises and stuff, that we have like the core and the foundation of modern yoga. Now, what's really fascinating is that, yoga just kind of like had this sort of longevity in India, but everybody practiced yoga in India. All the moms, all the householders, everybody would do yoga. And it wasn't like you'd go to a studio or whatever. It wasn't what it is now. When it came to the West in like the 60s and when it became modernized, is when I feel like it really evolved. And when I teach people in my trainings, I always say yoga is a very living, breathing type of energy, and it's always evolving and it's always changing. Yoga has done what it's done through me personally, and I've shared what it's done for me. And everybody that goes through these trainings, and everybody that goes through whatever they go through with yoga, like that's how it evolves.
Wow.
So what's really interesting, one day I asked one of my teachers, I said, why do we see so many females in yoga when originally it was, male dominated in India? And what really blew my mind, and I'm not saying this is true or not, but
Right.
what's really cool is that he said that all of these original yogis that were born in India, because in Indian philosophy and in Hinduism, they believe in reincarnation.
Hmm.
And he said that all of these original yogis that set the foundation in India are now being reborn in the West and reestablishing yoga in the West. And they were originally born as male dominated in the India to solidify what it was. And now they're coming back as female
Oh,
in the
wow.
West. And
Wow.
I was like,
Okay.
okay, that sounds really cool and very interesting. And it makes sense. And it's a great concept, right?
Yeah. So karmic duality.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Hmm.
That's so interesting. So I practice transcendental meditation,
Hmm.
and I learned it in Sanitas.
Hmm.
And my teachers actually learned from Maharishi Mahesh, who taught the Beatles, which I'm like, wow, cool. I'm part of the lineage, right? And in TM, it's a very simple practice. I don't know if you're familiar with
Somewhat.
transcendental meditation,
Hmm.
mantra driven,
Hmm.
a mantra that's assigned to you, and you repeat it internally. Um, but there's no religion attached to it. I think Maharishi Mahesh, when he came here to the states, he decided that he wanted to spread meditation
Hmm.
to the U.S. And Canada, and he wanted to strip down the meditation practice, take any religion aspects out of it, so that he could promote it
Hmm.
better to Americans who trend and tend to be Christian.
Absolutely.
Um, so he I don't want to say he minimized it, or he just focused on the technology
Yeah.
of the meditation. and
Hmm.
and for me, the meditation has been phenomenal in the sense that it's helped me. It gives you what you need. And I think yoga is very much. I think in your classes, you
Hmm.
you often say it's a breath exercise. The whole class
Yeah.
is breath
Hmm.
and meditation,
Hmm.
and I do believe that. I know in my meditation practice that if I'm tired, meditation gives me energy. If I need to, wind down, it'll let me wind
Hmm.
down as well. So it's intriguing that yoga, I did not know that about yoga, that it was intentionally driven towards opening up the hips so
Hmm.
that you could, meditate for longer. And I
Yeah.
could see the benefit of meditating for longer periods as well. And I really enjoyed that anecdote about karmic duality with the reincarnation of
Hmm.
of of females. Um, I still think a lot of men need to practice
Absolutely.
yoga.
Absolutely.
And one of the biggest pushbacks I get from men, I think, because men, particularly here in the West, we're so driven towards hard.
Hmm.
I need to move weight around, or
Yeah.
you got to push someone around. I got to fight someone.
Hmm.
You know, um, and I always tell my buddies who I mention yoga to. Now, granted, my practice needs to be enhanced in yoga. However, whenever I get pushback from my dudes, my bros, I tell them, "Hey, have you tried my boy Hano's vinyasa class?"
Yeah.
No.
Hmm.
So, men, we need hip opening. We
Absolutely.
need a lot of energy gets stuck. Can you
Yeah.
can you talk a little bit about how energy gets stuck, and
Sure.
and let's focus on the dudes,
Yeah.
and how just things get stuck in
Yeah.
us.
Yeah, so like the body is sort of like a receptacle of our experiences, and so energetically speaking, you have a lot of emotional energy that gets kind of placed in the body and stored in the body, and it's not just the hips. So, guys are really tight in the shoulders.
Yes, that's me.
Yeah,
Shoulders.
shoulders are super tight for guys. You often see guys like struggling to lift their arms over their head. That they're also tight like in the traps, and that
Hmm.
has a lot to do with it. But yoga I think is really interesting in that what it is, it's an actual science, and that's kind of like what these original yogis were exploring is like the human condition, and they identified all of these different things that we as most or if not all human beings all experience: the mind, the body, the breath, the energy, the emotion. So like they kind of identified each part of the human condition and said, okay, like if this is happening, do this. If this is going on, maybe think about that. So for men, I think in the West currently, because yoga is designed to kind of identify every part of a human, mostly speaking about emotional part, we as guys don't necessarily have um, the deepest connection to our emotional self. And I think that that's sort of like lost, just culturally speaking, and neither right or wrong, good or bad. It just kind of is. And so guys, I think, have a harder time um, regulating and identifying and understanding and connecting to emotional aspects of themselves. I think maybe because we would say that we identify that as feminine,
Right.
right? And so automatically it becomes like this sort of like male versus female type of thing, where it's part of us, right? And
Right.
I think emotional regulation and emotional health and well-being is a huge part of like why we have so many problems and so many issues that strike us as men with like addiction.
Yeah.
Um, and so yoga, it doesn't force anything, right? Although yoga asks that you look at these things. And sometimes for guys, that's kind of hard to do because for the most part, we live from our experience and what we know and how we're raised and all
Yes.
of that, right? So like to kind of introduce something that it is asking you to go a little bit further, a little bit deeper, takes a lot of people out of their comfort zones. And that's what yoga does. It pushes you to the edge of your comfort zone, and it asks you to take a look and identify and qualify all of these ideas, thoughts, beliefs, experiences, and how do they show up in your life on a day-to-day basis? How do they show up in relationship? And it just seems as though guys, for the most part, have a harder time taking those steps to do that type of work.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a challenge with men because it's scary to be vulnerable. It's
Absolutely.
scary to be seen as needing help or
Mhm.
weak, etc. Um, and my experience in yoga has been, yeah, that initially you go in there like, wow, it's just gonna be stretches and I don't know, laying down,
Mhm.
but no, it's a lot more than that. I
Yeah.
mean, your hips like firing at all,
Yeah.
yeah, at all levels, and you're like, oh my god, I just want to get out of this position. But
Mhm.
what I've learned in your class, you just focus on the breath and
Mhm.
oof. And then that resonates into a lot of other things because I find that a lot of the breath work that I've done in your classes, the yoga, um, particularly in hard positions,
Mhm.
for me particularly, I have like all this shoulder stuff that's from old football injuries and whatnot that I struggle with, and I'm just like, man, I gotta just breathe through it. But it does resonate into other aspects of my life where things are stressful in business, or maybe I get into an argument with my wife or what have you, or my kids are, driving me nuts. Um, breathe,
Yeah.
the breath. And yeah, I do encourage men to practice. What is the biggest struggle that you see men having when they come in initially and they've never done yoga
Sure.
before? Granted, I know we're going to be a little extra stiff. Women
Mhm.
tend to be a little bit more bendy
Mhm.
than men, um, and oftentimes I feel that people either confuse like, well, I can't touch my toes, so I'm not flexible,
Mhm.
to maybe like, well, maybe your hamstrings are really, really strong,
Sure.
but there's an imbalance.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why you can't. So I think yoga addresses all that.
Of
But
course.
what's the biggest struggle most men have when they first come into the studio?
I would say the biggest struggle is breathing.
The breathing.
Yeah. I think I think in general for the most part,
Hold our
yeah.
hold our breath.
Yeah, what's really interesting is that, breath is a natural component of our like everyday experience, right? Like, one of the really interesting facts about breath is that like you could go, you know, maybe 2 weeks without eating food, right?
Yeah.
You can go maybe 3 to 5 days without drinking water, but you can't go like more than 10 minutes without taking a breath, right? So, breath is like the sustaining force that really keeps us alive continuously. And it's a part of our physicality that we don't really notice or take part. It's like the body regulates itself. The body has all these mechanisms to regulate itself, and breath is one of those things that helps to regulate the nervous system. So, like your body naturally takes deep breaths in stressful situations.
Yes.
Like we naturally take big sighs, right?
Hmm.
And so when people come to yoga and you're asking them to breathe in a conscious way, it's difficult because it's part of like the sympathetic nervous system, which
Hmm.
your heartbeat is going at all times, your breath is going at all times, and you as an individual don't have to think about that,
Yeah.
right? So like when you're asked to think about those types of things and make them conscious, you're trying to now bring it into the parasympathetic nervous system, which is like conscious action, like movement, and all those things are regulated consciously, and you're actively participating in that. So that's really hard for people to kind of make that transition because it's a nervous system type of a thing. But for the most part, guys really struggle with that. I think like what you were saying as far as like strength, guys tend to be stronger and women tend to be more flexible. And what yoga does is it really kind of creates like this balance between strength and flexibility. So women have to work harder to gain strength, generally speaking. Like,
Right. There's some
don't
anomalies out there.
don't
Yeah.
misquote me.
There's
Uh,
exceptions to the rule.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And guys have to work harder to get more flexibility out of their bodies, right?
Absolutely.
Which is kind of normal. And the other interesting thing is that the right side of both men and women tend to be stronger, and we identify that as masculine, and the left side tends to be more flexible, and we identify that as feminine. So there's a lot of like characteristics that are, just like many different modalities that talk about yin, yang, opposing forces, positive, negative. In our bodies, we also have that. In yoga, what it does is it designs this whole experience to create balance
Yes.
between both positive, negative, masculine, feminine, sun, moon, all of these different energies. And so um, it's a big continuous uh, practice where it doesn't just like end. It's like a lifelong practice,
Right.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really cool that you bring that up because, especially now, there's been a lot more studies and more in the metaphysical and as we become more philosophical in the States, the study between masculine and feminine. And there's been a lot of talk about, these forces.
Mhm.
And, most men, masculine men I would say are sometimes in denial that they have feminine energy as well. And
Mhm.
there for men there's value in tapping into that resource, and for women there's a lot of value too. There's value in tapping into the masculine.
Mhm.
So I'm glad that you bring that up because it's a balance of things. And I think so many injuries that happen from a physical standpoint are because there's a lot of unbalanced attributes to the
Mhm.
body.
Mhm.
So yoga heals. Yoga heals. I know. Oh God, it's been like what 15, 10 years. I don't remember. But I when I really had a lumbar injury, herniated several discs. I was paralyzed on my left leg for quite some time. I couldn't lift my toes, and once I was able to diminish the pain a little bit, I got myself into yoga. Your class. I don't know if you remember this, but
Yeah.
you helped me modify a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
I couldn't bend down on
Mhm.
one side, on my left side, and you helped me modify. And I think that really helped heal to get that was it prana? Is it
Yeah.
prana, right?
Sure.
Prana. Get that energy into the
Yeah.
leg and heal it. Now I'm doing jujitsu and stuff.
Mhm.
And talking about jujitsu, jujitsu is a tough sport. Sometimes I'm a smaller person here. And oftentimes I'll get a big guy on top of me, like
Yeah.
trying to choke me out.
Mhm.
And my first reaction is like, but then
Mhm.
remember the yoga breath. And like,
Yeah.
oh, relax, and then I can get out. I was sharing with you before we started recording. My professor, Hall of Famer. She's a Hall of Famer, and she'll often, break down some details for us on a certain move that seems complicated. And
Mhm.
as most dudes, we're super stiff, and like she's like, "Ah, you can modify it this way, or you can try to enter this way." She's like, "But you need more yoga." So she likes yoga,
Yeah,
so she practices yoga, and she's a warrior, but she's
yeah,
practicing yoga.
yeah.
So yeah, I love that you brought that up. I wanted to talk a little bit about, we were talking a little bit about the origins of
Mhm,
yoga, like philosophy, religious attributes.
mhm,
My wife's been practicing,
mhm.
and she's really happy with it. It really helps her just flush everything out, and she feels so light afterwards. And she was talking with some friends who are, faith,
Mhm,
they're believers and so forth, and they were reluctant and were recommending her not practice
mhm.
yoga because it had some religious attributes to it.
Sure.
And she kind of pushed back. Well, no, yoga here in the West,
Mhm,
doesn't really have any religious undertones. There is a philosophy, there is a underlying philosophy of
mhm.
well-being and so forth. But can you speak to that point?
Sure. I mean, yeah, I think, yoga coming from India, it does have roots in Hinduism.
Hmm.
And there are postures that are named after Hindu
Hmm.
deities. There are postures that are named after a lot of sages. And so the association with kind of like Hinduism is very common.
Hmm.
And especially in the West, where, like you said, we were more of a Christian based, westernized kind of uh, country, right? And so I think it's a huge misconception, unfortunately,
Yeah.
but naturally,
Yeah.
and I think, like I said earlier, one of the things that yoga is really based on is humanness,
Hmm.
right? And so it speaks to the core of who we are as human beings. So it doesn't necessarily have a lot to do with religion. It has to do with human. And so when people would come that have strong beliefs or strong religious practices, um, I personally think that it's always going to add to that and enhance that and go deeper with that because it speaks to, again, like the energetic, the emotional, and the spiritual. And whatever that is for each person, it's like that's what religion is. Religion is your own personal journey with whatever it is that you believe. And if you practice something that's personal, why wouldn't that make your beliefs and your ideas and those things better or have a better understanding or a deeper connection or enrich them or enhance them? And that's been my experience, right? My experience, I was raised Catholic, um, and yoga's only brought me deeper into my faith and allowed me to really understand my position as a person, as an individual, as this little life being on this planet and creation and all of that, and so it really gives a lot of insight and recognition to creation, right? To like, the gift that we have of being in these physical bodies and having these minds and having this ability to walk, talk, breathe, eat, and live through this human experience, right? Like that in itself is a gift from a higher source. And the ability to recognize that and live from that, I think, is what makes a difference between, religion, so to say, and somebody who lives a spiritual life. You can have both, right? You can be very spiritual and not necessarily be religious, and you can be very religious
Yeah.
and not be spiritual.
True. 100%.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
So I think having a balance within that, just like we were talking about, is a huge benefit that yoga offers you if you're willing to kind of take those steps.
Amen, man. Amen to that. One of the things I tell people about your class specifically, and the variety of, and we'll get into the
Mhm.
different,
Sure.
styles of yoga, but what I tell individuals when I tell them, hey, go try my friend Hano's class, is there's this spiritual enrichment, as you mentioned, that occurs in your class. The breath,
Mhm.
the movement. There's a zen quality to it as well, and you walk out just you nurtured your soul quite, and so kudos to you because you obviously you're an enlightened, evolved a person. a man who's centered and knows who he is, rooted in himself, and you bring a lot of that groundedness to your class, and I always appreciate that. I mean, granted, you're gonna kick my ass in your class. Your vinyasa class is it's challenging, man. But you bring this groundedness
Mhm.
that I need, and a lot of men need that. A lot of
Sure.
men need to be grounded and just
Yeah.
centered. Let me ask you before we get into the
Mhm.
styles, because I just had this thought. So we were talking earlier about how men struggle when they come into yoga, but when you have men stick to it and they
Mhm.
stick to a practice and they come regularly, what are the first kind of things that you see shifting in their lives when they're practicing
Mm.
yoga?
So interesting. Um,
From a physical standpoint or
yeah,
even emotional, mental?
yeah. I think, like physically, you see a little bit of a kind of a release almost. You see kind of like a letting go or a dropping
Mm,
of like a front. A lot of guys, I don't want to say guys
like
often have a
like
front.
like an ego death kind of
Yeah,
thing, like
kind of like
letting go
that.
of the ego?
And like you said, the class is hard. The class is
Yeah.
challenging. And I have so many guys come in that are like, wow, that's the hardest thing I've ever done. One of the interesting things that like when I did my teacher training, there was like guys from the Marines that like went through boot camp and all of that. They were like, this is by far the hardest thing we've ever done. And so yoga is challenging because again, like I said, it makes you or it asks you to look at physical, mental, spiritual, emotional, energetic, and at the same time keep your composure, keep your breath, keep a center, right? And so like there's all this chaos happening. Um, and so like one of the differences you see with guys is that like it's this sort of rolling back of the shoulders, sort of a little bit more of a lightening. Um, there's probably less concern with I know for myself, speaking personally, like there's less concern of what anybody thinks or what anybody says. So it really kind of like gives you this um independence,
Yes.
free of like social, like societal kind of like norms that you have to do this, be this, say this, act this way. And so it just kind of like gives you the freedom because at the end of the day, that's what it's about. If yoga's about liberation and freedom. So it gives you the actual freedom to be
Authentic.
yourself,
Yes. So
you know.
you can come from the authentic self.
Absolutely.
Now, there's different modalities or styles,
Sure.
and I don't know if this is just a Western thing. I
Hmm.
like all your classes.
Yeah.
Vinyasa is my favorite, but you've got Hatha, Ashtanga,
Hmm.
Kundalini, Vinyasa. I'm sure I'm going to miss a
Oh
bunch,
yeah,
but
of course.
um, what do you Yin? Yin's my one of my favorites.
Yeah, let's just go chill and
Let's
hang out
go
in some
chill and
cozy.
hang out and hug this
Yeah,
pillow for a while.
yeah,
Yeah, but can you talk a little bit about,
sure.
obviously that you have more pop. I think most yoga studios these days trend, was it Hatha,
Sure.
Ashtanga, right?
Yeah. So Shtanga is kind of like probably the foundation of like modern yoga now. And the person that we sort of like say is the grandfather of modern yoga is this man named Krishna Macharya. And he was the teacher who taught this person named Patabi Joyce, and he taught Iyengar,
Mm,
Deshi Kashar. There's a lot of like um, styles that came from these teachers, and they came to the West. And Patabi Joyce was very famous for establishing Ashtanga Yoga, and Ashtanga Yoga was a series of multiple um, series of classes. So you had like primary series, second series, which were really like crazy postures, and they were like really going for it, and they still do. And from that, you have kind of like the evolution of Vinyasa Yoga, which is more of like a flow based. And so you have all these different styles. They're all rooted kind of like in the same postures. They're all the same postures,
right.
just kind of like different ways of doing them. Hatha, for example, you do one pose, you stop, you do the next pose, you stop. Whereas in Vinyasa, it's just a continuous flow, an eccentric contraction of the body. Ashtanga is a set series. You do the same postures each time. So you do have all these different things because I think what really works well is that you have all these different styles for all types of personality.
Yeah.
Somebody can go and get yoga um, in a yin class, like you said, and just have a very chill, uh, not a lot of like effort, right? But you still get the benefit of the yoga, right?
Mhm.
So I think that's what's really cool now is that you have so many ways to go about getting towards the same goal.
Yeah. So, for a dude who's needs it
Yep.
because we need it. Men
Mhm.
men need this kind of movement and breath work. What would you recommend their first class be? They no
Sure.
experience with yoga, but
Mhm.
they know they need to work on some mobility,
Yep.
some breath work,
Yep.
and get all the other benefits of yoga.
Mhm.
What would be the first class that they should try?
The first class that they should try should be the very first class that's available for them to
Okay,
go to.
I like that.
100%.
Okay, beautiful.
Yeah, because this is it. Like the hardest thing about yoga is going to yoga.
Yes.
So what if it's 11 o'clock in the afternoon, the 1 o'clock class, if you can make it, that's the one you go to.
All right.
So just being in that space and starting somewhere. Once you start and you start to get a sense of like the styles and what goes, then you can figure out what works best for you. But get in the space.
Yeah. What would you tell? And this is specific because
Mhm.
I'll share a little anecdote with
Yep.
you about my son. But men who are like, yoga's for women.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to go to that. Like,
Yeah.
but what would you tell a man
A
who
guy.
says that?
Yeah, just kind of like giving somebody an experience to realize how hard it is. I would say that a vinyasa class or any type of heated class,
Yes.
because the heat, the heat is such a popular style of yoga. Bikram, being sort of like the original heated yoga. Um, you put yourself in a 105-degree room and you're pushing your body to like the limit.
The
Yeah,
heart's like
like
pounding. Oof.
pounding, right? And so like it's almost like life and death experience, right? You're
Yes.
like,
Yes.
you're
Yeah.
saying some prayers in there.
Yeah, no,
S-
Veronica does not go to heated.
Yeah,
She's
so
like she can't. She just
it's hard.
doesn't like it. It's really hard.
Yeah,
I enjoy it.
yeah,
I love your gently
sure.
heated vinyasa with
Yeah.
Hano is that's challenging.
Yeah, and the benefit of the heat is for people who aren't necessarily experienced with yoga because again, like going back to the original core, like in India, the climate is hot,
True.
right? So like your body is already warm, and so when these guys were here in the West, they're out in like Montana and Indiana where it's like
Cold.
freezing cold,
Yeah.
right? I'm not that I've been there, but so they had to figure out how to like warm the body up properly to do crazy things with the body and so that the heat was something that they brought in and introduced as a way to warm up the body efficiently without having to know how to do it because normally it's breath work.
Yes.
So breath work is what warms the body up, and if somebody who doesn't know how to breathe properly, they're going to be more susceptible to injuring themselves.
Yeah, I did. Well, Wim Hof,
Yeah,
he's a yogi,
yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So I took one of his online courses, and I've been able to do ice baths and sitting there for 3, 5. The longest I've stayed in an ice bath was six
Wow,
minutes,
that's great.
and just doing a lot of the Wim Hof,
Mhm,
trying to heat my body up.
mhm.
And after I couldn't feel my fingers anymore, like, give me the hell out of here.
Yeah.
But yeah, it works. It does warm you up. I know when I've been up in the mountains in the cold and like
Mhm,
start doing some breath work,
mhm.
and it really enhance the heated sensation. It does warm you up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Um, you've done a lot of men's circles. I don't know if you're
Mhm.
still doing this stuff, type of work
Sure.
with men as well, and
Mhm.
I believe you've applied some yoga principles. Can you speak to a little bit about these men's circles and
Sure.
why you were doing them and what drove you to it?
Yeah. The men's work, I think, has always been something that I've wanted to implement, and getting a bunch of guys to come to yoga class is not easy to do.
No, it's not.
So I started that way and try to offer like a yoga class for guys, and we would get maybe like 3 guys, five
Yeah.
guys coming through. So um, getting guys together in a space where like you can incorporate some yoga ideas uh, was something that I think worked well. Where it was like it's a men's circle, it's a men's gathering, and I think now it's become a little more popular and a little more accepted, and guys are more willing to go and kind of explore that. And I think more than anything, one of the big things that guys take away from those is connection and community and friendship and like bonding.
We need that.
You know what I mean? And I think like what we were talking about earlier, as far as like the experience of guys going through kind of like societal norms, like we get alienated a lot. We're kind of like individualistically kind of go about our day and don't really focus on friendship and connection. Most guys maybe have one or two like really good friends that you could call up and be like, yo, man, this is what I got going on. Could you like listen? And so to be able to have a space where guys can come through and find other like-minded men who are also looking for connection, I think is a big part of why this is becoming more popular because we naturally need it. And so incorporating some yoga concept and some yoga practice in there goes a long way. And I think that kind of breaks up the experience. So like the men's circles that we would do and facilitate, we would have them for like an evening. So it'd be
Mhm.
a couple hours. We would have time for guys to get together and we'd have kind of leading questions that people would be able to explore and ask and discuss and create conversation, right?
Mm.
And so that's where you get the connection happening. And then we'd kind of break that up and we do yoga practice, we do breath work. Some of the ones that I've attended, they would have. I attended one that was facilitated by the Sacred Sons, and I would probably say that they're the ones that organization is probably at the forefront of men's work.
Yeah.
And so I went and I attended a weekend workshop out here in East San Diego at Hukumba, um, and it was powerful. It was really really powerful, and um, it had we did a whole bunch of stuff where like we were doing different types of movements. We were doing different types of exercises as far as um, we were boxing, we were
Wow.
sparring,
Cool.
which is really cool,
That's
right? Like
cool.
so like very masculine
Yeah.
type stuff. And we had a sweat lodge, or a temescal. Um, we did like hikes up in the mountains. So like just real strong connection based experiences. And so like when I started facilitating my own, that's where I was kind of,
Yeah.
drawing from and how do we connect with guys? Like getting a guy to like stand face to face with another man and just look him in the
Ooh.
eyes, right?
Yeah.
For a period of
Yeah.
time, like that's awkward
It is.
given any
For most
situation,
men,
right?
yeah, it is.
But to be able to just look at somebody in the eyes for a moment and just be like, you know what, like you're my brother, like you're just like me. We've gone through the same experiences, and so you recognize similarities in one another, and that also helps kind of like break down those barriers and create just common ground, right?
Yeah,
And
that's
that's where you
amazing.
create that connection.
That's amazing. I think yoga, a lot like jujitsu, and I'll say this for the men because it's a great place to create community.
Mhm.
And I like these two spaces, and I equate jujitsu with yoga in this sense because you go to a certain type of gym and everyone's kind of in the same mindset,
Yep.
groupthink,
Mhm.
the kind of cookie cutter. But yoga and jujitsu are parallels for me. Are you could have a police officer working out with the criminal he
Yeah,
just arrested in
absolutely.
the morning, and there's a
Mhm.
surgeon and a mailman and a construction
Totally.
worker and a PhD,
Absolutely.
and they're all together. And at the end of the day, they're part of the same community. It doesn't matter what they do for a living.
Yep.
And I love that about yoga. I love that about jujitsu. Um, so guys need to get in to see you. I wanted to celebrate you a little bit because you've been creating community now for what 24 years
Mhm.
being an instructor. You, Kish, Mark were the first guys down here in Chula to really bring it and open it up and
Mhm.
expose, especially people from South County who
Yep.
maybe had no knowledge, awareness, or access to yoga. They
Mhm.
can't go. They're not going to go to La Jolla to practice,
Right.
right? So you kind of yoga for the people, so to speak.
Mhm.
And you've done a lot of great work with celebrities and so forth. I don't know if you still are, but you were. If I can speak to this, you
Yep.
were a Lululemon ambassador.
Yes.
And now I'm excited to announce that you're
Mhm.
creating your own brand.
Yep.
You're creating the Hano brand, right? And
Yes.
man, I'm so excited.
Yeah.
If anyone's gonna do it, it's you, man. And my wife and I had a talk for many, many years. Man, Hano needs to have like his own like
Sure.
something. And
Yeah.
and now you're here, like
Yeah.
creating this brand and community. I'm excited
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah. I'm
So
excited about it as well.
tell us about the brand.
So yeah, we're gonna be launching sort of like the foray into the brand, and it's gonna be called Jano Yoga, and it has so many different components, but for the most part, it's gonna be sort of a virtually based yoga studio where you can practice on your own and get content and information and a lot of like the things that I've been teaching for 24 years at your own pace in your own way. What speaks to you philosophically, um, and so all those things are going to be you're going to be able to have access to that on an online platform. We're going to have products coming down. yoga mats, apparel, and all that sort of stuff. So that's all coming. Um, but I've been doing teacher trainings now for 20 years as well. And so in that space, I would have a group of people come in and we do 200 hours of training where I teach them to be yoga teachers. And they get a lot of information in that time frame. And at the end of that time frame, they graduate, we give them a certificate and like go out and teach yoga, right? And so there isn't a lot of like follow up after that. And so what I really want to do is be able to create an experience for people that have not only gone through my trainings, but have gone through any sort of teacher training and create community around that, especially for teachers that are just starting out. What do I do? How do I go about being a teacher? Where do I begin? And so I want to be able to offer mentorship and content and information to help you kind of continue your journey as a yoga teacher. Um, because like I said, yoga is an evolution and it's constantly moving. And I'm only going to be able to get to so many people. And so it's up to the people that I teach to learn how to teach yoga that are going to get to the people that I'm not going to get to.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's a continual, kind of like just branching out. And and so one of the big things that I want to be able to do is continue to help people learn how to become better teachers, how to become better practitioners, how to go about, being in a studio, how to go about being connected in community. We're going to be doing a lot of men's work. We're going to have a lot of specific stuff targeted for just guys. So that's
Mm.
all coming down the road. We're pretty much at the precipice of launching this thing, and so I'm really excited to
I'm so pumped for
get
you.
an opportunity to talk about it.
I think that you deserve it, man. I think that you are a leader in the space. You're a thought leader in yoga. Um, People who know your classes, know your philosophy, are really drawn to your classes. And I know of a lot of people who follow you around because you teach at
Sure.
multiple studios,
Yeah.
right? Right now, you're currently teaching.
I'm at 3
You're
now.
at three. You're
Yeah.
at Chula Vista Yoga Center,
Mhm.
South Bay. I mean,
S
South
South
Park
Park Yoga,
Yoga, and what was the third one?
Namaste
You're at
Fitness.
Namaste, and
Mhm.
that's at both
Yeah,
locations,
we're at
or
Otay Ranch and, at the East Lake location.
excellent. And Hano, so in Hano, your brand, the Hano spaces, the Hano community, how granted it's going to be online. How are you going to differentiate, or what's the differentiator of Hano
Yeah.
community? What's it going to be
I
like?
mean, the differentiator I think is gonna be my experience,
Yeah.
24 years of teaching yoga, and the community is gonna be people that have gone through the training, and those are gonna be sort of like the leaders of the community because it's not just gonna be me. The brand will be called Hano, but it's gonna be really bringing people up in the ranks that have been teaching,
Hmm.
that have gone through the trainings, that are part of like the community already, and making them ambassadors, beacons, people that can also platform themselves. So ideally, what I'd like to do is create a blueprint for how to do what I'm doing.
Right.
You know what I mean? Just follow these same steps, do these same things, and hopefully you'll have success. It takes time, and you got to put in the work, and
Absolutely, like anything.
absolutely have to kind of earn your space. But like, if you do it this way, like you will potentially have success.
Yeah. Do you foresee? 'Cause I know you already take people. You go to Bali
Yeah,
and you
absolutely.
do these retreats. Are you going to be doing more of those?
Yeah, we're going to be doing worldwide retreats. Bali's a hub for me. That's like my second home away
Well,
from
you get
home.
to surf too,
Yeah, I mean,
right?
I
So
get to surf, which is
yeah,
not a bad thing. Incredible waves. Shout out to Bali and my boy Kish.
yeah.
Um, so we have, we've had retreats all over the world already, and so we're going to continue that with sort of like the implementation of this brand and our sort of mission based along those lines. So it won't be just retreats, but it'll be like seminars and it'll be workshops and it'll be continuing education and it'll be for guys, it'll be for girls. So a lot of these things that we want to kind of branch out into and really kind of be specific as far as like we're going to go to Italy for a week and we're going to have not only learning how to cook in Italy, but we're going to be working on breath work,
Yes.
um, maybe a jujitsu and kind of like,
That's
what
a
I'm
good
saying?
one. Let's get that one going.
A yoga for jujitsu guys type of thing.
Yes.
So
Oh, we'll make that happen.
yeah, so
I need it. My hips don't lie.
absolutely.
um, when do you foresee the official launch of this? And are you gonna have a launch party or anything or how can we support you?
I think it's just going to be organic. I
Organic,
think it's
good.
going to be organic online. We're kind of already pushing some of the stuff out there. We've been creating a lot of content and recording a lot of things, and so It's just going to be a continual movement towards pushing that out. But we will have a website,
Good.
and that website, I believe, is ready to go. And so when that's kind of like up, that's where you'll go to get all the content, the subscriptions, and all that sort of stuff. So that's coming very soon.
Awesome, man. I'm so excited for you. Hano, I want to thank you for joining me today. It's always a pleasure. I always get like, I just always get the spiritual, when I'm with you. If you're interested in just learning a little bit more about yoga, if you're reluctant and have wanted to go, this is the man you need to see first. So, again, you can find him at Chula Vista Yoga Center, South Park Yoga, and either one of the Namaste fitness academies for yoga. And you're usually highlighted in their schedules, right? So they can find you.
I'm on there.
You're on there,
I'm on
yeah.
there.
So go to Hano's class, and we're gonna have. What's if someone wants to reach out to you and talk to you a little bit more about
Yeah.
yoga, if they're a little bit reluctant or have
Mhm.
questions, maybe they have some injuries. Where can they reach you?
I mean, the best place is probably social media,
Social media,
Instagram.
Instagram. What's
Um,
your handle on it?
just Jano Galindo, my name.
Jano Galindo, Jano
Yeah.
Galindo, and he's very responsive. Thank you, brother.
Of
I'm
course.
excited to do more work with you.
Yes.
I do have to get into your yoga class more regularly. I got to chase you down South Park and Chula
Yeah.
Vista.
Bring some guy friends.
I will. I'm gonna bring some jits,
Yeah.
guys,
Bring
and
some
we'll have
guys.
to put together a little jujitsu
Absolutely.
yoga mashup.
For sure.
That's gonna be fun, and
That'll be
maybe we'll
super.
get you in a gi
Hey, you
too to
know
try
what?
a class.
You never know.
Attaboy. Love you, brother.
Love you too, bro.
Thank you for all the work that you're doing.
Appreciate it, man.
The community's better for it. The world's better for it. You're just this amazing ambassador for peace and light, man. So
Wow.
thank you.
Thank you, bro.
Appreciate you,
I
bro.
appreciate it.